Never mind Cyprus, never mind the FOMC, never mind what's going on overseas, what's happening in South Africa. Are we creating jobs? The quarterly employment report has just been released in the last hour and a half or so. And in the studio with me, Michael Bagraham, Labour Advisor, Cape Chamber of Commerce. Michael, thanks very much for joining us this lunchtime. We've created 22,000 jobs apparently over the quarter. Good start, but not good enough.
Yeah, it is a good start. It isn't good enough for a December period, because remember the fourth quarter is December 2012 we're looking at. But it's good in the sense that when we last spoke, both of us were lamenting the mining strike, if you recall, and I thought there would be an absolute dive in that industry, and in fact there isn't. It seems to also, even in terms of the first quarter, it seems to be picking up again. So there's a little bit of movement in the mining industry, but I think we've got good news for South Africa in the sense that we were able to overcome probably our greatest strike we've ever had. We saw that in the numbers when our Minister of Finance looked at the income tax income that he received, and I think it was 5 billion rand down from the mining industry. We thought there would be devastation of jobs, but in fact this tells us a different story, which is wonderful news. We've got to applaud the business community because things are starting to happen.
Yeah, let's not underestimate what happened last year, because what you've just said, the greatest strike of recent times, it was the most devastating and potentially damaging event in South Africa since probably I've been reporting on business.
Well, since 1922, when Smuts sent the Air Force in to bomb the miners, this is probably the worst one we've had. So all of us here in South Africa have lived through history now. We don't want to repeat that. We must avoid that at all costs. And yes, we can't underestimate it because it's really given our income tax a great big knock. We weren't able to collect the money. That being said, these figures aren't bad. They're not that terrible. One figure that is standing out that is bad is manufacturing. That's down. However, you've got to read that in terms of how much manufacturing is done in December. We in South Africa...
Are these not seasonally adjusted, these figures? No, they're just
No. They give them as it is. This is the real-time figure, and it's a real figure, and it's good. We've got good reports here.
Manufacturing is 16-17% of the South African economy, so it's important. But let's you talk about the numbers. We've been talking glibly about 22,000 here and there, but let's have a look at the real figures. The non-agricultural sector of the South African economy increased its workforce by 22,000 persons, 0.3%. Okay, an estimated 8,439,000 employees to 8,461,000. But also the interesting thing here is the earnings and the amount that people are paid. It seems to be going up a little bit more than it should do.
Yeah, and that's a bit worrying. Of course, with those figures that you tell us, they don't tell us how many people have been employed in government and parastatals,
yes.
Which I suspect is skewing those figures somewhat.
The state is the biggest employer.
It is the biggest employer, and it's also the most expensive employer. In other words, they're paying the most. So I think this skews our figures a little bit. That being said, the real increases that we're seeing out there are greater than what we should be seeing, which is probably inflationary. You'll understand that better than me. I'm not an economist. But I think at the end of the day, what is happening over here is reasonably positive. I'm not asking people to go out into the streets and dance, but we certainly can't lament our fate.
No, well, certainly what I won't be doing. But anyway, this is the one. I have to go back to this now because we talked about wages going up. This reflects a quarterly increase, it says here, of 5.9%, and I'm talking about how much people have been paid. Now, more people are in employment, so obviously the wage bill goes up, but 5.9% on the quarter, that's huge.
That is good. Not huge, but it's good. It's good for the workforce. It means that money is filtering through and coming down to the man in the street, the worker. It doesn't tell us much about who's getting the increase and where they're actually employed, but it is good. That being said, it's also the extra people in the economy, so you've got to take off a little bit of that 5.9%. Let's say you take off 0.9 or 1% off that. So there's a 5% increase, which is not enormous. We have inflation, we have more expensive petrol, and living is a little bit more expensive, so I don't think that's huge. It doesn't compare to what they did to the farmers, where they gave everyone a 50% increase. That's certainly not what that's reflected. But then we're talking about non-farming activity over here.
Yes. We've almost gone the US route now, because every month we get the non-farm payrolls data from the US Labour Department. Is this a deliberate policy to bring ourselves in line with overseas peers?
I think so. The Department of Labour say it is. I'm a little bit more suspicious. I think we've lost so many farming workers that they're going to skew these figures completely, especially down here in the Western Cape, where we know about 30% of the farm workers are now out of work, and it's growing. People are still looking at possibly more retrenchments. So to talk about non-farmers, it actually suits us at the moment. In South Africa today, it would have been a little bit different, these figures, if we added both farming and non-farming together. But this is non-farming, and it doesn't tell us a bad picture.
No. Okay, well, let's just quick. We've got about 45 seconds left. Let's just sort of summarise what's going on here. We're coming off a low base. You're encouraged by the fact that mining, which had every right to have shed a lot of jobs, has actually consolidated and created a few. Can this trend be continued in the next quarter and beyond?
It can be. As long as Eskom can deliver the power, it can be. The whole industry is looking up, and we're quite excited about it.